Peter is professor at Reading University, has a long career as a poet in this country, and is also very well known as a translator from the Italian. A number of books, I think mainly from American presses, yeah? Princeton? Chicago. Yeah. So he's probably even better known in the States these days as a translator than here. But a very, very fine poet, and I'm delighted he's a Schurzman author. Peter Robinson.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Greg. And it's a delight to be reading with John and Carrie today. I'm going to begin with 3 short poems, total greenhorn poems. I've been to the United States once for less than a week, and these 3 poems all are connected in one way with that little trip. So here we go. Here's the first one. It's called Westwood Dusk, and it refers in the final verse to a movie called Stranger Than Fiction, which was showing at the time. Some of you may have seen it. It's about a guy who realizes that his life is being written by an English novelist played by Emma Thompson. And when I wrote the poem, I hadn't seen the film, but oddly enough, some of the detail in it sort of fits Stranger Than Fiction. Westwood Dusk. At the corner of Wiltshire and Westwood, what looked like a corpse had collapsed on the sidewalk, a smear of saliva expressed from his lips. Somebody glanced back, sun setting on the sea, beyond wild thin frontage, boulevards, palm trees, and a stoplight's countdown. I stepped off and ran for my life. That corpse was out cold, but breathing, and nobody in the least fazed at him gone west or westward. With sirens still sounding, a paramedic fire truck drew up at the bus stop. Those people left standing around as he lay. Fixed under a sky glow, Stranger Than Fiction had opened at the westward crest. I was checking my direction with best foot forward, seeing and believing it there in LA. Here's one that John published in the, here we are, here's the Notre Dame Review. I think is it the latest issue actually? Just about, yeah. I think there's a new one on the way, isn't there? Anyway, so this is one set, it's called At the Institute, set in the Art Institute in Chicago, with the subtitle After Charles Sheeler. There just happened to be an exhibition of Sheeler's paintings and photographs there when I happened to be there. There's a date on the bottom of the poem as well, the 30th of November 2006, and one of the reasons for that is because there's a reference to Mr. President in the poem, and that indicates that it's not the current holder of the position. At the Institute, after Charles Sheeler. He was touching the hard edge where life and art met. I was gazing at precisionist cityscapes and furniture, and just so's I wouldn't forget, there in a stillness like peace and silence secured at some price, Mr. President himself was defending his own legacy, his bloody adventure. He was staying the course, he would get the job done. A refurbishment worker's too loud radio come thoughtlessly from an adjacent room. And just so's I wouldn't forget, there the artist looks at nature was a painter in his studio, touching the hard edge where life and art met. And here's the third one of this little triptych. It's called Enigmas of Departure, and it's a memory of going to South Bend, and it refers to Giuseppe Verdi Airport at the beginning, which is the little airport in Parma. Enigmas of Departure. It was while I walked out to the plane, readied on an apron at Giuseppe Verdi Airport, hair raised by the breeze and a few spots of rain spattering the tarmac. Across its spaces came a sense of release in roaring silence before being cabined, cribbed, confined. And while I walked out from the gate, it caught me once again, as at South Bend, Michiana, since we also had to wait while our O'Hare plane arrived, and the Michiana field hazes off equally in a great plain. not that much wanting to go or to stay, but exposed in their flatness, what I would fleetingly feel from another winter's journey in the vastness was an isolate air around frame houses, in yards out beyond wide sidewalks and a green expanse, right, then a grey one, as we were cleared for take-off and were gone, to put yet more distance between. And the poems I thought I'd read for the rest of my little stint are all set in London, or actually in the vicinity of this building. It's an epigram about, or sort of connected with, the statue of Edith Cavell in St Martin's Lane. It's dedicated to Bill Manhire. I wrote it after we'd had lunch together, after 20 years or so of not meeting. And it's got an acronym at the end of the first line, which some of you in the audience I know will know. The acronym is OE, which stands for, in Australia and New Zealand, it stands for Overseas Experience. And the poem is called Abroad Thoughts, for Bill Manhire. Home I'd come from my own OE. After lunch, after 20-odd years and more, you compared me to some non-dead returnee from a distant war. We were paused by the statue of Edith Cavell, where I muddled up quotations. It was, patriotism is not enough, Bill, not the Lord is high above all nations. One of the things I was struck to read in the TLS recently was that the German poet Gottfried Benn was actually present at the execution of Edith Cavell and defended it. What have I got now? Oh yes, I've got, here's another one, yes. This is called Northumberland Avenue, which is just across that way, I think. No, that way. Running down from Trafalgar Square towards the river. And for you who play Monopoly in England, it's one of the streets on the British Monopoly board. This one's got a date on it too, the 28th of March 2009, and it was inspired by the visit. I think the time the current president and his wife first visited London, what was then called Fortress London, in fact, for the G8 summit, and there was a protest going on about various things. And so I just happened to be there with some Japanese friends of my daughter's who were so we were doing some tourism. And I wrote, this one sort of came out of it, Northumberland Avenue. On a visit to Fortress London too, you drifted away from Trafalgar Square, far as Northumberland Avenue, its spidery branches beginning to thicken and bud against stone facades, with row upon row of smut-coated windows, forming a fine faint grey. Police bollards and crush barricades cordoned the street from a protest procession, its freedom of speech a cacophony of causes against global warming, the wars, the monopoly money. But here in Northumberland Avenue, up the pigeons flew, through clumps of tourists, sun showers and sun, diffused by wind-driven clouds. Here in an absence of cars, in that week when they were to save the world, no banks, so we'd been told, drifting not far from an endless crowd's rainbow banners, you really could hear yourself think. You could pause in the riverine light of a mid-afternoon and speak freely. Here's one. Here's the penultimate one. It's called Doctrines of Unripe Times, and I got the title from Prime Minister John Major, who was speaking on the Andrew Marr show, and used the phrase to mean a good idea that couldn't be put into practice at the moment. Quite a useful political concept, I think, really, isn't it? Doctrines of Unripe Times. And I suppose I'll be a bit political myself if I say that this poem was written around the time that we had a woman Oxford Professor of Poetry for a week. Doctrines of Unripe Times. A Friday, the weekend starting early. 2 people sat outside a pub. I ask them for directions, but they're sorry, they haven't the faintest idea. Only it's just around the corner, this London park with its pushchair paths, tame swans on the mirrored clouds, its scrawny, fearless pigeons feeding from a spilt waste bin. Here, lake waters regarded through trees, stationed beyond a wrought iron fence, boughs bending under the weight they bear. Apples hang down low enough for a coot to peck at them. But into our summer, even getting what you want, beyond rowboats and pedalos, gulls pose like a fluttering celebrity. In punts or manoeuvred sculls, there's ambition for it, see, as one pulls ahead, one pulls from the race. You'll get what you're given and lump it or not among the world's false subtleties. It's all I can do, and it's all I can do to look at them, literally, hanging down low from each bough, green apples on the apple trees. Here's one which is inspired by a painting in the National Gallery, which also, as you know, is just around the corner. It's called Lorry Park Avenue. The painting is called The Avenue Sydenham by Camille Pissarro. One of those paintings that he did in 1871 when he was living in London, escaped from the Paris Commune. And some of you will know that my first wife and I lived in Sydenham, and she worked very near to Lorry Park Avenue back in the early 1980s. So this is Lorry Park Avenue by Camille Pissarro, 1871. Wisps of white cloud in a pale turquoise sky, Pissarro painted out of doors, and a church spire, its creamy stone, 2 or 3 passers by. He painted out one female figure. Her pentimenti could be seen, still on the gravel, advancing towards me as a darker stain. Sydenham, in an early springtime, just over a century after, not far from the hospice where she worked, I could imagine finding us on that avenue again. Then here, as warmth has come at least, there are things to do with the past, like droplets on those steady leaves, her Solomon's seal after rain. And down by more leafage-filled gardens, the flimsy petal purple-hearted poppies bring home illusions of another life's occluded possibilities. With foxglove, iris, the night-scented stock, everything that didn't happen, disappointed, went awry, is back as if making a mockery of how it was or why. But lacking such things to do with the past, like this figure he had painted out, who fills the air with an indelible stain, there'd be no possibilities. They thicken into leaf, his flanking trees. Look now, it's as plain as plain. And I'll finish off with this little one here, just a short poem. If you can imagine the idea, this is if you can imagine this poem as a photograph, it's a kind of it's a portrait of my wife in the negative. Hope that doesn't sound too bad. It's a love poem it's a love poem in reverse or something like that. It's called Next to Nothing, and it's my it's my version of a painting by Robert Rauschenberg, or for that matter Tracy Emin. Next to Nothing. Through a watery light of after rain, this bed, its personal history, brought back by container ship from Japan, shows in ruffled covers lines that say love spent the night here. Its indentations, your body's traces. This commonplace bed with everyday sheets, its rumples and creases, caused by the nightmare disturbances, forms a tableau of shadowy folds, where by contrast time tries to recover us in all senses. Yet still this unmade double bed, while you are away, preserves outlines where your body lay, reminding me what lovers do in their proximity, although I'm next to nothing now. Thank you.